Welcome back to more FPL content. This will be the final Transfers podcast of the season for Fantasy Premier League, heading into Gameweek 38. The deadline will be on Sunday, and I'll be going live as usual. And if you want to see a reaction stream, then let me know down in the comment section below. And also like this video. Let's get it to over 100 likes overall. And thank you to all subscribers, channel members, and patrons for helping us reach multiple goals in the last couple of weeks. And also check out the links in the description below to build all our social media platforms, including the Discord server, which is a great community to be a part of, my X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, Dylan RCM, for the latest FPL, and user fantasy updates. Speaking of which, there will be more videos headed your way for the Champions League final on the 31st of May, and that will mean yet another deadline stream is headed on the horizon. But after that, there will be a little mini break, so to speak. But throughout pre-season, I will be covering everything you need to know, from predicted prices, the actual prices when the game launches, and much more. So be sure to stay tuned. I did a lot of content last year as well for this Premier League campaign and for UCL Fantasy. So once those games are live, I'll be covering both of them in a lot of detail as usual. But let's get straight into this podcast, covering 11 players to buy, hold, sell, and skip. And I'm not even going to talk about 1 week punts, because essentially anyone you buy now is going to be a 1 week punt. We have nothing left afterwards in Fantasy Premier League, not at least until next season. So let's see if we can end this season as strongly as possible, get a green arrow, and also win our mini leagues. Over the last couple of weeks, I suggested Evanilson as a purchase, and that hasn't changed, but its ownership has increased slightly to 4.2% at the time of this recording. That's also meant a price increase to 5.8 million, and I think he's worth that investment. He's probably the best Bournemouth asset on paper based on 4 minutes. We saw Justin Kluivert subbed off at halftime against Man City in that 3-1 loss, and Evanilson forced the red card that Kovacic got in that particular game. But I think if you were to pick one Bournemouth player for Gameweek 38, it has to be Evanilson right now, and that's something I've kind of changed my mind about over the last couple of days since my best team video for the free hit, wildcard, or any chip you're using for Gameweek 38, and even with normal transfers, that team and video will definitely help you as well. But Evanilson has been very underrated this season with 10 goals and 5 fantasy assists there. The XG is 12.18. and 22 big chances is fairly impressive. He has accumulated 126 FPL points, and I think he's well worth the money, and he also deserves higher ownership. I think he'll probably reach 8 to 10% by the deadline, and it could even be more than that. I could see him being a very popular transfer, especially if Alexander Isak is ruled out. You've also got Mateus Cunha, who isn't starting games at the moment or getting those consistent minutes. So I think in a week where you don't have many standout forwards, Evanilson would be right up there in the podium, and that's why I discuss him in a lot of detail in my best team video as well. Facing Leicester at home without Jamie Vardy, I think Bournemouth will do the job this time. They actually lost the reverse fixture earlier this season, but I think the Cherries will win this time, and Evanilson will be a key part of it. After a 1-0 win against Newcastle, Arsenal virtually secured second place once more, and Champions League football is definitely locked in for them. But facing Southampton away, there could be some key changes in a week where Arsenal will be without some key players due to injury, and I'll discuss that very soon. But Bukayo Saka is available at the moment, and he's got 6 goals and 11 assists in the Premier League, and those numbers were very impressive at the time before his injury on the 21st of December, and from that point onwards, Arsenal's season just went downhill from there. But they have had injury problems throughout the campaign. I think some of it is self-inflicted, others you could say is a bit of bad luck, but every team does experience it at some stage. But Saka's creativity has been very impressive, even when he has come back from his injury. We haven't seen too many big chances created, to be fair, in the Premier League, because he had 20 by the December stage. So only creating 1 there is maybe a bit underwhelming, but I still think he has shown it in the Champions League, and he has been a man of big moments, scoring against the likes of Paris Saint-Germain and Real Madrid upon his return, and he's got 126 FPL points as well. His ownership is 17.8%, and he faces Southampton away, which is marked as number 1 on the FDR, the fixture difficulty rating. So a few weeks ago, FPL have kind of revamped their colour scheme, so the likes of Southampton and Leicester will be kind of highlighted and separated from the other teams and fixtures to really kind of highlight them as the very easiest you can get in the Premier League this season. But we'll see how the newly promoted teams will do in the next campaign. Will they be as bad as this batch that we got in this calendar year? But I think Bukayo Saka can do really well against Southampton. He showed it in this campaign with a 16-pointer at the Emirates, and those that went for that captaincy on Saka would have made huge gains at the time. And for Gameweek 38, with his ownership at less than 20%, I think the EO on the captaincy, and just owning Saka will definitely be there. And this is a great differential, so to speak, in terms of your mini leagues and also going up in certain rank points. And it really does depend on where you're sitting at this moment in time. But Bukayo Saka is a great option for the captaincy, which I'll talk about in my deadline stream with the graphics for the top 10 captaincy options. And I think he's worth purchasing for Gameweek 38. Jarrod Bowen has returned in 5 consecutive games, producing 44 points in that time frame, and he has been extremely consistent for West Ham, who have had a dismal season, but a shining light in their campaign has been Jarrod Bowen. And apart from a few other odd exceptions like Wan-Bissaka, I think most West Ham players have severely underperformed, and Graham Potter hasn't been able to get that reaction out of the Hammers that he would have hoped for. But there have been some good results along the way, a 1-0 victory against Arsenal at the Emirates, and also beating Manchester United, as bad as they are, at Old Trafford. And Jarrod Bowen was instrumental in both victories, and even scored in defeats like the one against Chelsea upon his return from injury. So I think Jarrod Bowen is a fantastic buy right now, and just like Saka, his ownership is less than 20%, with 12 Premier League goals, 10 assists. The XGI is 15.11, and 180 FPL points has marked yet another solid season for the West Ham talisman, facing Ipswich Town away from home. I don't just think Jarrod Bowen is in the top 10 for the captaincy, I think could be right up there in the podium of the best captaincy shouts for Gameweek 38. And you might want to go differential with the likes of Kudus and double up on West Ham offensively, and that is certainly a viable option considering how poor Ipswich Town have been this season. But Jarrod Bowen is by far the standout in that West Ham team, and I think amongst all midfielders, he might even be number 1 in this game week. Having said that, you're probably looking for differentials and low-owned players who can really make the difference in a given game week with a high ceiling, and Gabriel Martinelli does have that. He has been showing more consistency since his return from injury, but he can still be quite frustrating, especially in front of goal with his decision-making. That's something he hasn't really improved upon over the last couple of seasons, but he has 8 goals in this Premier League campaign with 4 fantasy assists, 15 big chances, and 123 FPL points. His ownership is currently 2.9%, so this will be a massive differential, and you could go for Martinelli and Saka simultaneously to cover the Arsenal attack. And with the injury to William Saliba and Timber, that could give you an excuse to go away from that double Arsenal defence, or just selling those defenders in general and then go into the attackers and kind of hoping that you get a high scoring thriller in the final game of this campaign. And that's a trend we have seen in Gameweek 38 over the last couple of seasons, and Martinelli can do really well in this given occasion. Now, all his stats are fairly decent, but nothing spectacular. 46 shots inside the box, 51 shots overall, and the XG is 6.56. But at this price, I think Martinelli offers decent value, and he's not someone I'd recommend for a consistent stint in your team. He's really just a 1 game week punt with that low ownership and targeting that Southampton fixture. So if you aren't really too keen on Saka, and you might even argue that he could be benched, I think Martinelli could be a great alternative. As I covered in my recent FPL video, the best team for Gameweek 38, Eddie Howe gave an update on Alexander Isak on Sunday after the game against Arsenal, and he said the following: "It's unknown if he's okay for next week. He felt a bit of stiffness after training yesterday. He went for a scan as a precaution. A lot will depend on how he reacts in the next few days. This is linked to a groin issue he had early in this season." So if we get any updates and team news, I'll be giving them on this channel in my team selection video, or perhaps the deadline stream with every single team playing at the same time. That boosts the chances of team news and also leaks. But having said that, with Newcastle, a lot of these sources pretty much speculate and you can't really trust them, so take it with a pinch of salt. But anything from a reliable source, it will definitely be covered on this channel. But Isak has 23 goals and 6 fantasy assists, 96 shots for the season, and an XG figure of 20.15 and 36 big chances, 11 big chance created and 42 key passes. He was a massive miss for Newcastle against Arsenal, and I think in that first half where the Toon were dominating, I think Isak would have been the difference maker, as he was in the Carabao Cup semi-finals and also in that 1-0 win at St James's Park back in October. And I think Isak is one of the best forwards in Europe, but the kind of big downside to him is the injury record, and he could have surgery on that groin during the summer to kind of put that issue to bed. But I think he could be available against Everton, and I would only sell him if he's definitely ruled out. And when you look at the alternatives in that position, I'm not too fond of them, with the exception of Evanilson, because going into Gameweek 38 and before we got that kind of surprise exclusion from the squad against Arsenal, I was kind of talking about Isak and Evanilson as the two standouts for Gameweek 38, and that hasn't changed over the last couple of days. But if he's unavailable, that will have to change, of course, and you might want to go for Wissa, even Matheus Cunha, who is a bit of a risk with the minutes, and one of Haaland or Marmoush could be a decent option to complement the likes of Evanilson, who is right now the standout forward for the final Gameweek of the season. There is a certain Chris Wood who has been extremely reliable this season with 20 goals for the campaign, which is an all-time best for him, 3 assists, 41 bonus points, 198 FPL points overall, and he could reach 200 against Chelsea at home, and that could also secure Champions League football for Nottingham Forest. It's going to be a right battle there for those teams between 3rd and 7th, including Aston Villa, Chelsea, Man City, and Nottingham Forest themselves, and I think Chris Wood is a solid choice, and that's why he's so template with 31.7% ownership, and he was one of my best picks from Gameweek 1. Unfortunately, though, I have kind of missed him in the last couple of weeks, but he's also been fairly inconsistent, but when he does return, it will hurt you, and for those that do have Chris Wood, I think he's worth holding on to right now, but if you're in the market for a forward, I would suggest Evanilson over Chris Wood, even though he is fixture-proof and Chris Wood scored against Chelsea early in this campaign. I still think the ceiling of Evanilson and the fixture is definitely much more enticing for Gameweek 38. But Chris Wood has solid stats, nothing spectacular by any means. The XG is 12.61, which is quite modest compared to Alexander Isak, for example. 26 big chances, though, is fairly impressive for a budget forward. And of course, he started this season at 6 million, and he currently is priced at 7.2. So I think Chris Wood is worth holding on to in most scenarios, especially if you've got Alexander Isak or other problems in that forward line. And with the exception of Evanilson, I don't see many better forwards for Gameweek 38 in terms of the fixture, quality of the player, or also the teams performing in. FPL can be really frustrating at times, and Kevin De Bruyne missing an open goal just the day after Mohamed Salah missed an open goal himself, and I had captained him and also had De Bruyne in my team. That can sometimes sum up your season, so to speak, but Kevin De Bruyne played his last ever game at the Etihad in Gameweek 37 facing Bournemouth, and now facing Fulham. That is the last dance in a Man City shirt. He also played in the FA Cup final, which Man City lost by a 1-0 scoreline against Crystal Palace, and surprises can happen in football, especially in a competition like the FA Cup. But I think De Bruyne can still end his Man City career very strongly in terms of goals or assists, which is what you're looking for in an FPL asset. But if you have the means and funds to go to Bukayo Saka, for example, I would seriously consider doing it, and it's something I'll discuss in my upcoming team selection video as well. But in most scenarios, I don't think it's worth selling De Bruyne, and only a handful of midfielders really stand out above the rest, and I think that would include the likes of Jarrod Bowen and Bukayo Saka, at least on paper, when you look at the fixture, and also the minutes and other factors like the quality of those assets as well. But Kevin De Bruyne is still right up there for me with 4 goals, 9 assists, 55 key passes, and 113 FPL points. His ownership is 13.8%, so he's not a differential, but at the same time, he's not a template pick, so to speak. So I think having Kevin De Bruyne alongside Saka and Bowen would be ideal for Gameweek 38, and that looks like a very strong midfield foundation for the final Gameweek here. And I think De Bruyne will deliver against Fulham. Man City have won their last 10 games against that opposition. Could they make 11? I think considering their recent form and sometimes just lacking that attacking prowess in front of goal. I know they showed it against Bournemouth, but more often than not, we haven't seen them score too many goals in a given game. I think Crystal Palace in the Premier League was one exception to that, where they were 2-0 down and then won 5-2. A lot of their wins have been either 2-1 or 1-0, but I think Kevin De Bruyne can be a difference maker, and if he does score or provide an assist, Kevin De Bruyne will have a great chance of accumulating bonus points. Mikel Arteta confirmed that Saliba and Timber had surgery on his ankle yesterday, and he'll miss Gameweek 38 and several weeks worth of action going into pre-season as well. And he's not the only Arsenal defender to miss out. Of course, Gabriel was injured already, Tomiyasu as well, but also William Saliba, which I'll talk about very soon. But in terms of replacements, you can go like for like with Calafiori, White, or Kivior. I think offensively, Calafiori will be the most interesting in my opinion, but Kivior offers the best value, and downgrading one of Timber or Saliba to the Polish centre-back could really help you with the funds to buy Saka or make those purchases in other areas, and that could really help you to get a lot of points from other positions. But Timber has 1 goal, 3 assists, only 4 shots on target, and 114 FPL points. He's definitely one to look at for the next campaign. Maybe not so much for the attacking numbers, but he should play virtually every game for Arsenal, and that's something that should probably change as well, because he has been overplayed after suffering an ACL injury in Game Week 1 of the previous campaign, and he has played virtually every single game in this season, and he has been significantly overplayed because Ben White has also missed a lot of football as well. So I think Jurrien Timber is a good FPL asset, but he's out for Game Week 38, and you should replace him with an Arsenal defender, Milos Kerkez, or perhaps a Newcastle asset like Fabian Schär, Livramento, or Kieran Trippier if he's available. The same applies for William Saliba. In terms of the best replacements, I'd be looking at those sorts of assets, and let's keep an eye out for Kieran Trippier and seeing if he's available, because if he is, he's one of my favourite defenders for Game Week 38. But in the case of Saliba, and looking at his prospects going forward, I think he's a good FPL asset as well, but Gabriel is always going to be the standout because of his set piece threat, and going into next season, if they are similarly priced, I would always encourage you to go for Gabriel instead. Now, if there is a 0.5 million difference in price, that could definitely change a little bit, but I think Saliba is just a sell for Game Week 38 now, and we'll assess him going into next season, and let's see what his final price is for the 2025-26 campaign as well. But he had 2 goals, no assists, only 6 shots, and 130 FPL points for this campaign. And both goals came in back-to-back matches against Man United and Fulham when Gabriel was out. So Saliba kind of took that role of being that set-piece threat as well, and also getting on the end of those crosses from open play too. But he hasn't really been able to build from that, and he hasn't scored that many times this season. So that's something you can definitely add to his game, and that's something Gabriel has over him alongside the leadership. And Saliba has struggled at times in the absence of Gabriel. That partnership is spectacular, and Saliba has a lot of potential, probably the highest of any centre-back in world football, but he has made a lot of mistakes, especially in the last couple of months. And whilst his partnership with Kivior is fairly solid, I also think Saliba has looked shakier compared to when Gabriel is alongside him. So unfortunately, it was a great fixture against Southampton away, and it was worth keeping Saliba until Game Week 38. But because of the injury, which will see him out for several weeks, William Saliba is a sell. Another defender I'd consider selling is Daniel Munoz. In the case of the other two, they're quite obvious because they're both missing Game Week 38, and if you are in need of a defender, you definitely should be prioritizing selling them. But with Munoz, you can easily bench him in a lot of cases, and that's something I'm planning to do against Liverpool away. But he does have the attacking threat, and even if Crystal Palace lose the game or concede a lot of goals, you could still see Munoz walk away with a decent return with 4 goals and 6 assists in the Premier League alone. In the FA Cup final, he also got the assist for the winning goal scored by Eze, and 33 shots inside the box is very impressive for a wing-back. 140 FPL points is also solid, and the ownership figure is quite template at 20.2%. His price tag has remained fairly stable recently at 5.2 million, but if you can go to the likes of Kerkez, Livramento, Trippier if he's fit, or an Arsenal defender like Calafiori, White, or Kivior, I think those options stand out above Daniel Munoz, and he could be a weak link in your lineup if you decide to keep Munoz and start him against Liverpool away. Aston Villa kept clean sheets in 3 consecutive Premier League matches, and they beat Tottenham Hotspur 2-0 in Game Week 37, and Konsa scored a goal, got 15 points overall, and that's 2 goals for the season, no assists, the XG is 1.3 and 102 FPL points, but he has come in clutch for his owners recently. I just don't think it's worth buying him now. As bad as Man United are, they still have a great record against Aston Villa with 5 wins out of the last 10 matches and only 2 losses there, and it might be a bit of hangover after the Europa League final, which of course will take a lot out of Manchester United there. But I think with Aston Villa, they might even struggle to get the win that they need at Old Trafford, and even if they do get that result, I just don't really think a clean sheet is nailed on as it probably was in recent weeks. Now, Aston Villa defenders have been decent. I don't think they're terrible picks. For those that have Konsa, he could be worth holding on to and maybe starting, but the standouts for me are from Newcastle, Bournemouth and Arsenal for Game Week 38, especially in that defensive line, and I would prioritise those options over Konsa. We have approached the end of the final FPL Transfers podcast of the season, this time of Game Week 38, where I highlight 11 players to buy, hold, sell and skip. If you want to see these videos return next season, then let me know down in the comment section below. And like this video, let's get it to over 100, and also subscribe, share, all that good stuff. and the same goes for if you want to see a reaction stream on Sunday. But keep your eyes peeled for the team selection for Gameweek 38, a deadline stream on Sunday, and for UCL Fantasy, I'll make a best team video combining the wildcard and the limitless, and in my own team selection for matchday 17, I'll be talking about how we can build the best team possible with 5 free transfers, and on the 31st of May, for the Champions League final, I'll be going live with the final deadline stream of the season. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. Thank you very much for all your support throughout the season, to all the channel members, patrons, subscribers, and those that watch every single UCL Fantasy and FPL video. I'll see you very soon for more live streams and content, and that includes this Sunday for the final FPL deadline stream of the season.